So I think it's good we start with Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, maliki yawmiddin, iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een, ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim, ghayri al-maghdubi alayhim wa lad-dallin, sadaqa Allahu al-'aliyyul 'azim. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعن الله ولا أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين آمين يا رب العالمين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So this is part 33 of our ongoing series of discussions on the book attributed to Imam al-Sadiq entitled Misbah al-Sharia, or the Lantern of the Path. From this session onwards, the style of these Wednesday majalis will shift. In the past, each session would attempt to cover a vast amount of ground in one sitting, often becoming very dense and overwhelming. While the richness of the material is essential, it is equally important that its nuances are understood and retained. For this reason, the approach is changing. Discussions will now be spread out over multiple sessions, making them slightly shorter but more focused and digestible. The new format will follow a method sometimes described as the 3-point sermon. Each majlis will revolve around 3 main points, allowing the core ideas to be explained easily and supported by Quranic verses, hadith, scholarly insight, and historical analysis. Each of the points will then conclude with practical takeaways, what we call calls to clarify. And this ties into the Tabi'in approach that we've taken. This cumulative approach means that the foundational principles of our study remain unchanged. Each session builds upon the last, weaving together into a larger interconnected tapestry. It is therefore still crucial that the previous sessions are reviewed, at least in a cursory manner, though a full study is always far more beneficial, so that we can prevent misunderstandings and garner the most from our time together. Applying this new structure over the coming 4 majalis, we will trace the life, trials, and strategy of Imam al-Ridha, step by step, without rushing through the details. And before we start, we will have a recap of the previous session about Imam al-Kadhim. If I can get salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So our previous session transitioned from the era of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq to that of his son and successor, the 7th Imam, Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim. His 35-year Imamate from 148 AH to 183 AH is presented as one of the most difficult periods in Shia history, marked by intense persecution under the consolidated power of the Abbasid Caliphate. So the Imam's leadership coincided with the reigns of 4 powerful Abbasid Caliphs, al-Mansur, al-Mahdi, al-Hadi, and Harun al-Rashid. Unlike the weak, crumbling Umayyad dynasty faced by Imam al-Sadiq, the Abbasid state was at the height of its stability, wealth, and surveillance. The environment was suffocating, with open rebellion being nigh on impossible. The Abbasids co-opted religion, using court scholars to issue rulings that sanctified their tyranny. Despite this, the Shia recognized the dual authority. Harun al-Rashid was the political caliph who collected the taxes, or kharaj, and Imam al-Kadhim was the true imam who received the religious dues, or khums. This demonstrated where the community's true loyalty lay. The Imam's mission was symbolized by 3 items seen in his room: a coarse garment representing a life of struggle, a sword symbolizing the readiness for jihad or battle when commanded, and the Quran, the ultimate goal of establishing a just society. Given the extreme danger, the Imam's primary strategy was Taqiyyah, or strategic prudence. This was not deceit or cowardice, as we explained, but rather a revolutionary method to preserve the Shia community and its beliefs. We looked at the idea of Taqiyyah being like a shield and a spear, in that it protects the believers from destruction while allowing the truth to be advanced strategically. And secondly, we had the idea of, we spoke about 2 tests of loyalty: we highlighted two contrasting examples. The first one was Ali ibn Yaqtin, who was a high-ranking minister in the Harun Abbasi government, and who was commanded by Imam al-Kadhim to remain in his position, since his position served as a protection for the Shia, making his service permissible. You then had the notion of Safwan al-Jamal, who rented his camels to Harun for official journeys, and he was sharply rebuked by the Imam. The Imam stated that any act, even indirectly, that supports a tyrant's power, down to even wishing just for their survival to get paid, is forbidden. Now, the Imam's direct challenges, Imam al-Kadhim's direct challenges to the Abbasid legitimacy, though subtle, were unmistakable. Two key encounters that we discussed with Harun al-Rashid sealed his fate. The first one was at the Prophet's grave. Harun greeted the Prophet as his cousin, but the Imam greeted him as my father, publicly asserting his superior claim to inheritance and leadership. Secondly, you have the notion of the issue of Fadak, the boundaries of Fadak. When Harun Abbasi offered to return the land of Fadak, the Imam defined its true boundaries as the entire Islamic lands, Islamic empire, all the way from Aden in Yemen to Samarkand to Africa to the Mediterranean to Armenia, Azerbaijan. This was a clear declaration that the Imam was claiming the right to the entire caliphate, not just a small piece of land. These confrontations led to the Imam's long imprisonment. He was moved between prisons in Basra and Baghdad, finally ending up in the dungeon of the notoriously cruel Sindi ibn Shahak, where he was eventually martyred by way of poison. We then looked at the meaning of the word Rafida and the call to unity. Upon his martyrdom, the Imam's body was actually placed on a bridge in Baghdad with the proclamation, "This is the Imam of the Rafida." So we discussed and we understood that the term Rafida, meaning those who refuse or reject, was a slur used by the state to brand the Shia as outcasts. However, the Imams reclaimed it as a badge of honor, explaining that they were named this because we rejected falsehood, al-batil, and upheld the truth, al-haq. Second point with regard to the word Rafida is a call to unity. In the sermon, we clarified that this rejection of falsehood must never translate into hostility towards other Muslims. We cited Fatawi from Imam Khamenei and Ayatollah Sistani, and we stressed that insulting other Muslims and other groups within Islam is forbidden, and the symbols they hold sacred, it's forbidden to insult them, and that Islamic unity against common enemies, against oppression, injustice, colonialism, imperialism, Zionism, these are the primary obligations. The core lesson we got was ritual versus loyalty. And one of the most poignant parts of the session, of the previous session, was a critical reflection prompted by the words of the scholar Sayyid Hashim al-Haydari. He posed the searing question, saying, for 7 years Imam al-Kadhim was in prison. Where were his Shia? They would go on foot to Karbala while the real Hussein was in prison. This critique highlights the tragedy that the Shia community was preoccupied with rituals for a past Imam while failing to act for the living Imam of their time. The core lesson is that devotion expressed through rituals is meaningless if it is not accompanied by active loyalty and sacrifice for the cause of the present-day Imam. This historical failure serves as a profound warning for us today in the era of the ghaiba or occultation of Imam al-Mahdi. The Imam's imprisonment was like a divine rehearsal for the ghaiba, for occultation. The test remains the same. Will we be people who simply perform rituals, or will we actively prepare for our Imam's return by establishing justice and resisting tyranny? The supplication for his return must be a catalyst for action, not a mere substitute for it. In this, our 33rd session, we turn to Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha, whose appointment as heir or heir apparent by Ma'mun Abbasi has puzzled many across history. We will see how this episode was neither capitulation nor compromise, but another divinely guided chapter in the 250-year jihad of the Imams. In his most beautiful name and with full trust in his support, we move forward. Please give me a salawat and we continue.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد عجل فرجهم.
So first we have a prologue, Imam al-Ridha and the Trap of Thrones. So the life of Imam al-Ridha, peace and blessings be upon him, stands as one of the most extraordinary episodes in the long struggle of the Ahlulbayt. Where earlier Imams faced dungeons, swords, and poison, Imam al-Ridha was confronted with something far more subtler: the attempt to absorb Imamate into the machinery of power. The Abbasid Caliph Ma'mun believed he could neutralize Shiism not by destroying the Imam, but by crowning him. By naming him his heir apparent, he sought to strip Imamah of its revolutionary edge, to convert it from a divine covenant into a courtly ornament. But what Ma'mun intended as containment actually became amplification. Through his refusal, his conditions, his journey, his debates, and his martyrdom, Imam al-Ridha clarified once and for all that Imamah is not a throne to be bestowed, but rather it is a trust from God that cannot be co-opted. Across the next 4 sessions, we will walk step by step through this chapter, looking at how the Imam inherited suffocation, yet turned it into strategy, how a forced journey became a pulpit of da'wah, or a call, advocacy, invitational propagation, how hypocrisy was exposed and Shiism strengthened, and how Imamah was reaffirmed as a divine trust beyond every throne. This is not only history, it is a mirror for our own times, where false leaders parade themselves as guardians of faith, where tyrants cloak themselves with piety, and when truth must again be clarified. To follow in Imam al-Ridha's steps in these sessions is to prepare ourselves to follow Imam al-Mahdi. May our souls be his ransom, and may God hasten his return in our own lives. So first, let's look at the sun behind the clouds, a strategy of silence. The martyrdom of Imam Musa al-Kadhim was a storm that shook the community of the faithful. al-Rashid had sought to extinguish the light of Imamah by imprisoning the Imam for years in the darkness of Baghdad's cells, until he finally resorted to poison. Sheikh al-Mufid points out in Kitab al-Irshad that the scene was filled with blood. He quotes, "Blood was dripping from Harun's sword." And like with all of these sessions, there are references and citations throughout the entire write-up, which I encourage everyone to look at. It was in this suffocating environment where the Abbasid monarchy stood at its strongest that Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha assumed the mantle of divine leadership. The years that followed, nearly a decade of Harun's reign, and the civil war between his son Amin and Ma'mun, are described by historians with heavy silence. There are few recorded details of the Imam's actions in this period. But silence in the books of history is not silence in the mission of God's proof. This was not the silence of absence, but the silence of strategy, the silence of Taqiyyah, the principle of precautionary strategic prudence, concealing one's actions and words under oppressive rule in order to safeguard the truth until the time is ripe. Imam al-Ridha was continuing the very mission of Karbala. The struggle of the Ahlulbayt did not end with the blood of Imam Hussein, nor with the chains of Sayyid Zainab, nor with the prisons of Imam Musa al-Kadhim. Rather, it flowed into the hidden years of Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha, years in which the community was held together, guided discreetly, preserved from disintegration, and prepared for the next confrontation. The Quran teaches us that divine leadership, or Imamah, rests upon 2 foundations: patience and certainty. In Quran, in Surah Sajda, the chapter of the prostration, 32nd chapter of the Quran, verse number 24. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, "We made from them leaders who guide by our command when they had been patient and had conviction in our signs." In another verse, in Surah Anbiya, the chapter of the prophets, 21st chapter of the Quran, verse number 73, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, "We made them leaders who guided by our command, and we inspired them to do good works, to maintain the prayer, and to give the alms, and they worshipped us alone." The Imams are not leaders by worldly conquest. Their authority flows from their sabr, their patience or resistance in trial, and yaqeen, certainty in God. Imam al-Ridha embodied both: patient endurance under Abbasid suffocation, and certain conviction that the light of God could never be extinguished by prisons or swords or any other means. Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq explained the nature of the Imam in a single sentence. He said, and again, the references are all in the write-up. I strongly encourage everyone to review them. Imam al-Sadiq said, "The Imam is like the Kaaba. He is approached, but he does not go to others. The Imam does not chase worldly power. He stands like the Kaaba as the axis, as the axis around which hearts revolve. Even in chains, even in silence, even in exile, the Imams remain the pole of guidance." Imam al-Sadiq also said, "If the earth were to remain without an Imam, it would sink," meaning it would perish. The Imam is the very security of existence. Without him, the world itself collapses. With him, even if hidden, the world continues. Ayatollah Jawadi Amali, may Allah protect him, reflects on this reality. He says, "The Imam is the axis of the life of the community. The life of society revolves around his existence. Through the Imam's patience and certainty, history is shaped and the truth is preserved, even in the harshest conditions of oppression and repression." Therefore, the silence of Imam al-Ridha's early Imamate was not silence at all. It was the hidden continuity of Ashura, the underground flame that kept the Shia alive until the next stage of the struggle. And here the connection to our present is clear. We live in the ghaiba, the occultation of Imam al-Mahdi. May our souls be his ransom, may God hasten his return. Our Imam is alive, yet he is veiled. His voice is hidden, yet his guidance continues. A famous hadith describes this ghaiba. Imam says, "As for the benefit of me during my occultation, it is like the benefit of the sun when it is hidden from the eyes by clouds." Just as Imam al-Ridha was hidden in the suffocation of Harun and Ma'mun, guiding quietly yet decisively, so too our Imam guides us from behind the veil. The test is the same: loyalty in absence, to remain anchored in the axis even when the world would have us believe that the Imam is silent or not present. Let's now have a look at the call to clarify the three pillars for an age of absence. The first one, patience is not waiting. It is active preservation of truth when the sword is raised against it. Certainty is not naive optimism. It is conviction that the promise of God cannot be erased by prisons or by propaganda. The silence of Imam al-Ridha was a rehearsal for the silence of Imam al-Hujjah. May our souls be his ransom. To remain loyal in the age of ghaiba is to hold firm to the axis, even when hidden. Please give me a salawat. We move to the second point, which is the Caliph's gambit, a gilded cage.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So when Ma'mun emerged victorious over his brother Amin in the year 198 after Hijrah, he inherited a throne, but not security. The Abbasid dynasty had survived its civil war, but the loyalty of the people was fragile. More dangerous than rebels with swords was the underground movement of the Shia, a movement rooted in faith, inspired by martyrdom, and sustained by the chain of imams. Harun al-Rashid, Ma'mun's father, had tried to crush this movement with prisons and poison. He thought that by chaining Imam Musa al-Kadhim in the dungeons of Baghdad, he could silence the message of truth. But martyrdom had only deepened the loyalty of the faithful. Ma'mun knew the sword had fallen and had failed. He needed a new method, something more subtle, but no less lethal. And so he devised a strategy unprecedented in the history of the Abbasids to name Imam al-Ridha as his successor. Outwardly, this looked like honor, yet inwardly it was entrapment. So let's now look at the architecture of the gilded cage. There were 6 points within the strategy that Ma'mun had. These points are: number 1, to neutralize the revolutionary spirit of the Shia. By placing their Imam inside the Abbasid palace, Ma'mun sought to drain Shiism of its energy. No longer an oppressed movement, it would disappear to have been co-opted into the state. Number 2, to legitimize Abbasid rule. If Imam al-Ridha accepted the succession, it could be claimed that the Prophet's own descendants had endorsed Abbasid authority. The Shia argument against these rulers were illegitimate would be completely undermined. Number 3, to control the Imam directly. In Marv, under the eye, the city of Marv, under the eye of the Caliph, the Imam would be monitored. He would be restricted and he would be contained. His freedom of movement would entirely vanish. Number 4, to sever the Imam from the people. Wrapped in courtly protocol and isolated in the palace, the Imam would be distanced from the heart of the masses. Number 5, to gain spiritual prestige. By raising an Alawi, a descendant of Imam Ali, in this case Imam al-Ridha, over his own Abbasid relatives, Ma'mun could present himself as just, pious, and magnanimous. And number 6, to turn the Imam into an apologist for Abbasid crimes. If the Imam was seen justifying government actions, his credibility could be harnessed to shield the corruption of the state. This was the brilliance and danger of Ma'mun's plan. It was not the brutality of the sword, but rather the seduction of legitimacy. So we now look at the idea of a Caliph in Pharaoh's robes. The Quran describes exactly such tyrants, rulers who speak the language of faith, but who use power to divide, deceive, and destroy. In Quran, in Surah Qasas, the chapter of the narrations, 28th chapter of the Quran, verse number 4, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, "Indeed, Pharaoh exalted himself in the land and divided its people into factions, oppressing a group amongst them, slaughtering their sons and sparing their women. Indeed, he was one of the corruptors." Pharaoh divided and conquered. Ma'mun attempted the same, to split the ummah, to weaken the oppressed, and to use the symbols of truth as tools of control. Elsewhere, the Quran warns of those whose words impress, but whose deeds are corrupt. In Quran, in Surah al-Baqarah, the chapter of the cow, 2nd chapter of the Quran, verses 204 to 205, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Among the people is he whose speech about the life of this world impresses you, and he even calls God to witness what is in his heart. Yet he is the fiercest of opponents. And when he turns away, he strives to spread corruption in the land, destroying crops and offspring. God does not love corruption." Could these words not describe Ma'mun, who cloaked his tyranny in eloquence, who invoked God to justify his schemes, yet whose hands were stained with corruption? Now we have, "He is not from me, a trial as dark as the night." Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him and his family, has warned of such rulers. He says, Prophet Muhammad has said, "There will be rulers after me who lie and oppress. Whoever affirms their lies and aids them in their oppression is not from me, and I am not from him." And even from the books of our brethren of the Sunnah, we have. And all of these references, like I've said, are in the write-up. In the books of the Sunnah, we have quoting Prophet Muhammad again, there will be rulers after me. Whoever believes their lies and helps them in their oppression is not from me, and I am not from him. And whoever does not believe their lies and does not help them in their oppression is from me, and I am from him. Imam al-Sadiq gave a further warning, saying, beware of the doors of the rulers, for within them lies a trial as dark as the night. This was precisely the darkness into which Ma'mun sought to drag Imam al-Ridha. Now we have unveiling the mask. The authority feared more than swords. Imam Khomeini reflected on this Abbasid tactic. He said, the oppressors have always sought to impose themselves upon the people under the cover of religion and to deceive them. However, it is true Islam which has always unveiled their ugliness and their falsehood. And Imam Khamenei similarly warned that tyrants fear the Ahlulbayt more than they fear rebels, saying, our Imams possess true legitimacy and genuine authority. For this reason, the rulers of their time feared them more than they feared swords. Let's now look at the modern cloak of tyranny and a call to insight, or Basirah. And does this not mirror our own world? When governments today appoint religious advisors or use clerics to justify their wars and crimes, is it not the same strategy as Ma'mun, to use the symbols of truth to sanctify oppression? The Imam's era reminds us that the greatest danger to truth is not only open persecution, but also subtle co-option. To cloak tyranny in robes of piety is more dangerous than to wield the sword openly. And so the lesson is clear. To survive such deception, the faithful must cultivate insight, or Basirah. Without it, the symbols of truth can be twisted into tools of falsehood. With it, masks fall and hypocrisy is exposed. This is the responsibility in the time of Imam al-Mahdi, may our souls be his ransom, and may God hasten his return. Just as Imam al-Ridha refused to become Ma'mun's legitimizer, we too must refuse to let today's false rulers, who cloak genocide and injustice in words of religion, claim legitimacy from us. And now our call to clarify, developing our Basirah, or our insight. Firstly, recognize that the most dangerous threat to truth is not persecution, but rather its co-option. Number two, be vigilant against rulers and institutions who use the language of religion to sanctify oppression. Develop Basirah, or insight, so that hypocrisy is exposed and tyranny cannot hide behind sacred or holy words. Remember that in the age of Imam al-Mahdi, may our souls be his ransom, to clarify truth against deception is to prepare for his uprising. Please give me a salawat when we move on to the final point, which is the Imam's opening gambit, a farewell to Medina.
اللهم صل على محمد
محمد وعجل فرجه.
When Ma'mun summoned Imam al-Ridha, peace and blessings be upon him, from Medina to Marv, it was not an invitation, but a command under threat. The Imam himself made it clear that this journey was not one of honor, but of martyrdom. At his farewell to the shrine of the Prophet, he wept, raised his hands, and he declared, I am being taken away from the neighborhood of my grandfather, peace be upon him and his family, and I will never return to him again. From the outset, the Imam framed his journey not as a triumph of Ma'mun's generosity, but as a forced march towards his own death. A crown of legitimacy and a mirror of humiliation. When Ma'mun offered succession in Marv, Imam al-Ridha refused outright. Shaykh al-Mufid narrates, he firmly refused his demand. It was only when Ma'mun threatened him with death that the Imam accepted, and even then, he ensured that all knew his acceptance was under compulsion and under duress, and his reluctance became public knowledge, and even Fadl ibn Sahal, Ma'mun's chief advisor or Vizier, admitted. It has been said, and this is quoted by Shaykh al-Mufid in Kitab al-Irshad, the references are in the write-up, It has been said that Fadl ibn Sahal said to Ma'mun, I have never seen a caliphate more humiliated. And sometimes the translation of the word used is mismanaged, wasted, debased, or neglected than this one. What Ma'mun intended as a crown of legitimacy became instead a mirror of humiliation. The Imam turned compulsion into exposure. The Imam did not merely accept reluctantly, he stripped the title of substance. He laid down conditions. He would not appoint or dismiss. He would not judge or command. And he would not involve himself in war or policy. He accepted the name, but not the function. In his own words clarify. He said, Imam al-Ridha himself said, I entered into the succession unwillingly, like one compelled into it. This was Taqiyyah in its most active form, turning compulsion into exposure, stripping Ma'mun's plan of any meaning. And then there's an eloquence of refusal, a sermon from the Caliph's throne. And more than just neutralizing Ma'mun's plot, the Imam seized it as an opportunity. Every debate in Ma'mun's court became a platform to proclaim the truth of Imamah. Every question posed was answered with proofs that elevated the Ahlulbayt and revealed the hollowness of the Abbasid claim. The Quran speaks of the firmness of God's chosen ones. In Quran, in Surah Ibrahim, the chapter of Prophet Ibrahim, 14th chapter of the Quran, verse number 27, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, God makes firm those who have faith with a steadfast word in the life of this world and in the hereafter. Imam al-Ridha's firmness turned Ma'mun's throne into a mimbar. The Khalif who hoped to silence him instead gave him the largest audience possible. Ayatollah Misbah Yazdi, may God rest his pure soul, described this principle, saying, sometimes refusal itself, the very act of not accepting, is the most eloquent sermon in the face of tyranny. The Imam's refusal to engage, his refusal to legitimize, became the sermon that rang louder than any court proclamation. And the message here is, do not lend legitimacy to the illegitimate. Here lies the lesson for our age. In the ghaiba of Imam al-Mahdi, may our souls be his ransom and may God hasten his return, we too are surrounded by systems that seek not only to repress us, but to co-opt us. Sometimes the duty is to participate with integrity, as Prophet Joseph or Yusuf did in Egypt. Sometimes the duty is to refuse with clarity, as Imam al-Ridha did in Marv. The test is knowing which path preserves the truth. Imam al-Sadiq warned against those who would try to lure believers into the courts of power, saying, whoever goes to them, supports them in their falsehoods, and helps them in their oppression is not of us. The refusal of Imam al-Ridha was not cowardice, but it was courage. The courage to stand apart, the courage to expose by abstention. In a world where rulers still cloak themselves in religion and piety while committing oppression, the Imam's stance is a map for us. Do not lend legitimacy to the illegitimate. Now let's break the fourth wall. If Ma'mun's court was a theater, the Imam did not play his role in the script. Instead, he broke the fourth wall, speaking directly to the people, turning the trap into a stage for tabeen or clarification. What was meant to silence him became his megaphone. And this is what is required today. The media, the institutions, the narratives of power, all are designed as theaters to control the story, to control the narrative. The duty of the believer is to refuse the script, to speak truth from within the stage, to turn propaganda into a pulpit. This is the inheritance of Imam al-Ridha and the duty of Imam Mahdi's followers. And now the call to clarify, being the clarifiers for the Imam. Firstly, we should understand that Taqiyyah is not retreat, but it is a strategy of survival and exposure. Number two, recognize that sometimes refusal itself is a sermon, louder than words. Number three, refuse to legitimize oppressive systems in thought, in word, and in deed. Next, to use every imposed platform, every forced stage as a member, a pulpit of truth. And number five, and know that this is the duty in the ghaibah, to be the clarifiers for the Imam until he rises to fill the earth with justice and equity. Please give me a loud salawat and we move to the conclusion.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد عجل فرجه.
So the life of Imam al-Ridha, peace and blessings be upon him, in this opening phase teaches three enduring lessons. Firstly, that divine leadership survives suffocation through patience and certainty. Number two, that tyranny seeks not only to destroy the truth, but also to co-opt it. And number three, that prudence and taqiyyah, when wielded by an imam or a righteous believer, can transform a trap into a platform. These are lessons for our own age, the age of Imam al-Mahdi, may our souls be his ransom, and may God hasten his return. In a world of suffocation and deceit, we too must preserve the truth. We must resist co-option, and we must expose hypocrisy. And this is only the beginning of our exploration of Imam al-Ridha's Imamah. Over the next 3 sessions, we will continue this journey. In the next session, number 34, we will explain how the Imam turned his forced journey into a pulpit, delivering the golden chain hadith at Naishapur, engaging in debates and inspiring poets who reshaped public sentiment. Following that, in session 35, we will witness how Ma'mun's plan unraveled, how Shiism grew stronger, and what fiqh or jurisprudential lessons emerge about cooperation and resistance. Finally, in session 36, we will return to the theological essence of Imamah, reflect on its application today, and connect this legacy directly to the living Imam of our age. In this way, we will allow the life of Imam al-Ridha to speak to us across time, not in one overwhelming sitting, but in 4 carefully woven gatherings, each building upon the one that came before. Please give me a salawat, and we have the supplication eulogy for Imam al-Ridha.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه.
So this supplication eulogy is titled Chains into Light, Thrones into Witness. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. O God, send your blessings upon Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, the lanterns of your guidance, the vessels of your mercy, and the proofs against all creation. Peace be upon you, O Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha, the successor of the patience of Musa al-Kadhim, O heir of the blood of Karbala, O oppressed Imam who turned chains into honor, O witness who transformed the throne into a pulpit of truth. You were dragged from Medina in sorrow. You bade farewell to the shrine of your grandfather. You declared that this was the journey of your death, and yet you turned compulsion into clarity and duress into da'wah. What Ma'mun sought as his victory became his humiliation, and what he imagined as his legitimacy became his exposure. O Imam, your debates shook palaces. Your words lit fires in the hearts of the faithful. Your silence became louder than the Caliph's proclamations. You revealed that the Imam is never absorbed, that divine leadership cannot be bought or co-opted. We live in an age where false rulers still wear masks of piety. Charlatans still roam the earth professing justice while spreading corruption. They speak of peace while they murder children. They claim sanctity while desecrating humanity. They sit on thrones of deceit and drench the earth in blood. Our eyes turn to Gaza, to its shattered homes, to its starved and broken children, to its mothers crying over mass graves. Our hearts ache, for we are too weak to stop the slaughter, too distant to shield the innocent. But at the very least, O God, do not let us be silent. Make us witnesses who expose the killers, clarifiers who preserve the memory of the martyrs, voices who never allow the innocent to be forgotten. O Lord, grant us Basirah, the insight to pierce the veils of hypocrisy. Grant us courage to speak truth against the Ma'muns of our time. Protect Islam in our hands, in our families, and in our societies. Do not let us be deceived by the outward show of piety from those who destroy crops, lives, and futures. O awaited Imam, O Mahdi, O son of al-Ridha, we cry to you as we cry in Ziyarat al-Yasin. Peace be upon you, O caller to God and the guide to his signs. Rise, O Qa'im, and end this reign of lies. Rise, O avenger of every oppressed child, every shattered home, every forgotten grave. Rise and let the thrones of falsehood crumble, so that the chains of the faithful may be lifted. Until that day, make us your clarifiers, your witnesses, your servants. Let our pens, our tongues, and our hearts be soldiers of your cause. O God, hasten the return of your wali. Grant him victory and make us among those who stand with him, so that chains become light and thrones become witness. Amen, O Lord, sustainer of the universes. Amen, O most merciful of the merciful. Wa akhiru da'wani alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.